Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of the Terri Show that I want to start with a question. Do you have any boundary bullies, or what I like to call repeat boundary offenders, in your life? You may feel like a broken record, like you're always saying the same thing, like, let me know that you're going to be late, or, they're doing the thing they say they're not going to do. They're acting like they're not going to do it again when you confront them, and then they do. So what do you do in that situation? How can you stop that round robin or that groundhog day of frustration and pain and suffering? Well, in today's episode, I'm going to be talking all about how to create appropriate consequences for boundary violations and how we can communicate this in a way so that we are understood by the people in our life. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to do everything we want them to do, but communication at least gives them an opportunity to do the things that you want them to do. But before we get started, if you happen to be new to my channel, please introduce yourself in the comments because we are a friendly group. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so that you get notified every time I roll out new videos, which is every Tuesday and Thursday, to help you up-level the joy, satisfaction, success in your life and reduce the pain and suffering, because that is what I am all about. I also love all your comments. I so appreciate how active this channel is. Thank you for all your questions. Thank you for being here and supporting each other. And I love to highlight your comments. So I'm going to highlight Be Happy 1964. This was under the episode called Are You Settling in Your Life? 4 Signs to Watch Out For and What to Do Instead. And Be Happy 1964 says, Terri, this entire episode spoke to me. You encapsulated every aspect of this topic in such a way that it is so relatable. I've caught myself asking questions. It's not that bad, right? How is this showing up for me? Your content is life-changing, and I thank you for opening up further opportunities to grow within each and every episode. Yes, right? We don't want to say it is not that bad if we are suffering. So I appreciate your comment, Be Happy 1964. Thank you, thank you, thank you for letting me know. Thank you for telling me. Thank you guys for being here. I super duper appreciate you. All right, so let's just start. We can start at the top with boundaries. Part of what inspired me to do this episode is that I recently had created a 10-day boundary challenge for Insight Timer, which I'm on, by the way, if you guys don't know, and you want meditation in your pocket, I'm right there, and I've got tons of free meditations on Insight Timer. I love being there. But the feedback from the people taking the 10-day boundary challenge was that they loved it, but one comment came up and they asked about boundaries and consequences and wanted more information on how to actually do it, maybe more examples. So let's just start with what are boundaries. If you listen to my podcast, if you watch the YouTube stuff, then I talk about this a lot, but hey, many of you are new. So according to me, boundaries are basically you knowing your preferences, your limits, your desires, and your deal breakers, and having the ability to share them when you want, to verbally express them. Your boundaries are basically your own personal rules of engagement. And these let other people know what's okay with you and what is not okay with you. So that's the working definition of boundaries that my book is based on, that all my work is based on. So at least we're all starting in the same place. Why is it important that we set boundaries, that we communicate our preferences, our limits, our desires, and our deal breakers? Well, one thing is that it's a way that we protect ourselves, right? Our own sovereignty. If someone is trampling on our boundaries by establishing what they are with words, by letting them know, we are protecting ourselves. But another amazing thing that communicating your boundaries, talking true, as I like to say, telling the truth about how you feel about things and what you want and what you need, this also promotes a healthy relationship or healthy relationships, because we do this in all the relationships in our life. And it also protects the relationship itself. Because when these go unspoken, when our needs go unmet, what do you think happens? We get resentful. We get pissed off. Our feelings start changing. And a lot of times, the people that we're in relationships with have no idea how we're feeling. They know something's wrong. They just don't know what, because we're not saying. I feel like another thing that boundaries really does, having healthy boundaries and knowing what they are and being able to express them, is that it really establishes your own self-respect, your ability to take personal agency over your own life, right? I always talk about having a self-determined life and how incredibly important that is. So that's all the great stuff about boundaries, but let's bring it one step further. What are consequences? So the way that I teach it with boundaries is that we have boundary first timers. So that's someone who you've not had a conversation with. And then we have repeat offenders. And then we get into having boundary destroyers and a whole bunch of other really, really rough stuff. But let's just start with the basic stuff, which is if someone is a boundary first timer, if you have never told them how you feel about something, if you've never set a limit, if you've never told them your preference, right? They're just going under the assumption that whatever is happening is fine if you're not saying that it's not. And then we have the repeat offenders. And those are the people I was sort of talking about at the top of this, which is the people who they violate a boundary that you've set. They say they're not going to do it again, and then they do it again. And then you complain again, or you get upset, or you cry, or whatever it is. And that doesn't actually change their behavior. So here's the thing with consequences, is that consequences, it is basically letting the other person know that if they continue violating your boundaries, that this is the action you will take. Because here's the thing, we cannot control other people. Let's get really clear right now. Consequences are not about controlling or punishing others. They're really about the same thing that boundaries are about: protecting ourselves, having self-respect, and in turn, that protects our relationships. So the importance of having consequences for boundary violations is that if you don't, what inspires the other person to change? Sometimes with a boundary first timer, you can tell them how you feel and say, I would prefer if, or could you please call me when you say you're going to, or whatever it is. And they may literally just get right on board and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. You're right. I said I would call you at 8 and I didn't do it, and I'm sorry, and it won't happen again. Now, that may sound unrealistic to you, but I promise you, I've been teaching this for decades. Sometimes literally people just don't know, or they're clueless, or they don't have the ability to take the temperature, your temperature, the temperature in a room. Some people just are not good with social cues. So when we sort of get into that default position of being like, well, they should just know, or I don't know why, if they were raised right, they'd know, or if they were a decent human being, they'd know. None of that stuff is true. But once you share with the person how you feel, what you want, what your limit is, if they then respect it, they're no longer violating your boundary, right? So then that person is kind of, okay, now we've established a new way of interacting, great. With repeat offenders, this is really where consequences come in. And this is the sad truth about human beings. Generally speaking, pain is our greatest motivator. So a consequence isn't to inflict pain necessarily on someone else, but it probably will. Meaning, a lot of times our consequences are like, I will no longer do this, right? So in removing yourself, making yourself unavailable for certain interactions, that person is going to feel the loss of you in that interaction. We have to set up consequences, because if not, you could just spend the rest of your life having the same fight in your relationship, having the same fight in your family of origin, feeling unheard, feeling unseen, feeling trampled over. Like, this happens all the time in people's lives, but it's also completely avoidable. So what are the challenges to setting consequences before I get into the how to do it? Well, fear, right? We are afraid of conflict, many of us. We are afraid to be rejected. We are afraid to be perceived as selfish. We are afraid that we're going to feel guilty if we assert ourselves, because a lot of us, if you've been a people pleaser in your life, there's a certain level of comfort in being a bit of a martyr. And that may not feel great to hear or to know that it's true, but it is because I was there. So certainly you guys by now know that I'm sure as hell not judging you, because I became an expert on this because I was a disaster on this. And that whole feeling of being used and abused and feeling underappreciated, when so much of the time we have not asserted our preferences, our limits, or our deal breakers in those relationships. And if we have not set a consequence if the person continues to violate. So it's an incredibly important aspect of having healthy boundaries and having healthy relationships. So in the guide, you guys, that goes along with this episode, just go to terricole.com/guide. I'm going to talk about some of it now, but I'm giving you a bunch of examples, like actual scripts of what to say when you're setting a consequence with someone. Because here's the thing with consequences. They need to be comparable sort of to what the violation is, right? Not all boundaries are created equally, which is why I put them in categories of preferences, limits, and deal breakers, right? Your deal breaker means that is a non-negotiable boundary for you. So maybe in your life, a non-negotiable boundary is someone who has had therapy. That was one for me before I met my husband. I was like, no more unexamined minds. No thanks. Like, it's been so frustrating and so exhausting. I need someone who's taking care of their own mental health, and then we can come together and talk about it. That was a deal breaker. A lot of my friends didn't understand that. I also didn't want to be with someone who was in recovery. I am. One person who has addiction issues in a relationship is enough for me, and that can only be me. And again, people didn't understand. But I kind of didn't give a shit because my feeling was they don't have to understand. My deal breakers are my business that I must share with the people in my life. And your deal breakers are, you have a right to what they are, even if other people don't understand it. Like, they don't have to understand it, but you have to know it. Because how can we establish healthy boundaries and how can we establish appropriate consequences if you don't know what your deal breakers are? Because I found a lot of times in my therapy practice and in my groups, women in particular will question whether they have a right to that deal breaker. And I say you do, as long as your deal breaker isn't about controlling the other person, right? You can have a preference that you and your person, let's say if you don't live together, communicate once a day. But you saying, well, it's my boundary that when you're out with your friends, you call me every hour or you text me every hour. That's not a boundary. That's just control. And we need to see the difference, right? Because if you say, my preference is that we talk once a day, which I don't think that that's out of control. But again, I'm a talker, so I wouldn't mind that. If the other person is not a talker or they don't like that, you might have to compromise. But you can only do it if you put your preferences out for the other person to see. And that's where we have the ability to negotiate for our preferences, for what it is that we would like. And then you can meet in the middle. If the other person says, I find it very distracting during the day, can we please just do it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then see each other all weekend? Whatever. Like, you can come to terms with what that is together, but not unless you're talking about it. The reason why I say in relationships, any relationships, that establishing boundaries early and often is really prudent is because you're already training people how to treat you. You are saying what I want, how I feel, what I think is important. When you think it's important, right? We can't put it on the other person that only they can think it's important. When you have self-consideration, someone wants you to meet them somewhere or, do it on a day that doesn't work for you. And instead of saying something, you cancel your plans and then they cancel last minute and now you're all pissed off. Why not just assert yourself and say, hey, that Wednesday doesn't work. I'm free Thursday and the following Wednesday, right? This is a way of getting your need met and respecting yourself. All right, long way around the barn. Let's get back to consequences. Boundaries early and often are helpful, right? And I don't think that we immediately set up consequences unless you're talking about deal breakers. So one of my friends, Lisa Billiou, who has a really amazing podcast that I was on. I saw her when I was out there in California. She told me she had 2 big deal breakers that she told her husband as soon as they started dating. She was like, so you know, if you ever cheat on me or lay a hand on me in like an aggressive way, there'll be no ever coming back from that for me. Like that will end the relationship. Now, some people may say, well, that's like, wow, I thought it was amazing. I'm not saying her husband, Tom, had any plans of cheating on her or hitting her, but she was so clear from the beginning that there's also a lot of respect in knowing who you are and just saying, hey, this will be the end of us. And that is a major consequence, right? Again, consequences, we want them to be proportionate to the violation and being really mindful that we're not using them as a manipulation technique. Part of the thing with consequences is Lisa's husband knew. Again, I'm not saying he ever would have thought of doing those things. I have no idea. But he was so clear up front from what she said of what that consequence was, and was he willing to risk it to do any of those actions. It's important to remember also that boundaries and consequences, the myth about boundaries is that it's sort of about punishing or controlling other people. And as I said at the top, it's not that at all. So if you have someone who, let's just say, a family member who stops by your house without letting you know, you can say, let them know, I appreciate that you want to visit, but I actually would make a simple request that you give me a heads up. Text to see if it's a good time for me because I work from home and it's not always a good time for me. Then if that person continues to break that boundary by just stopping by, you basically have to say, hey, I asked you multiple times to let me know. And now I'm going to tell you straight up, do not stop by. And if you do, without texting, I'm not going to open the door. I mean, now that may sound like extreme, but I don't think it is. I had a client who had this happen with her parents. They moved close to where she was, and they just thought there was an open door policy. And she was finally like, no. And then that client changed the locks to her house. Her parents had a key. And they were so upset at first. And then they finally had a family meeting, and she was like, you guys, I asked you so many times. You were violating my boundary, my need for privacy, my home, my sanctuary, where I also work. How do you know that I'm not having sex with my husband while you're just walking in the door? Like, it doesn't work. And I gave you plenty of warning. And I asked you multiple times. And it really upset me, your lack of respect for how I felt about it. And now this is where we are. Then they started respecting. Eventually, about 8 months later, she gave them a key because she was going away and wanted them to water her plants. But it was something that was an extreme step for her to actually take that step. And I do not think that that is an unreasonable consequence when you have repeat offenders. And family of origin, you guys, can be the worst. I mean, partners can be bad too. But family of origin, it's almost like her parents couldn't stop thinking of her as a child and feeling like whatever they do is fine to do. So anyway, in the guide, I'm giving you sort of the steps for you to come up with your own consequences for boundary violations, but I'll give you another example. So if you're in a meeting and you have a coworker who is always interrupting while you're talking, you can say right there, hey, I'd appreciate it if you would let me finish my thought before jumping in. I would love it if we could take turns speaking during the meeting. So that's setting a regular boundary. It's making a simple request that they stop cutting you off. It's doing it in a way that's not like totally humiliating them, right? But if they are a repeat offender, you have to then go to them and say, I cannot continue to have productive meetings if you keep interrupting. And if the behavior continues, I'm going to need to talk to our supervisor and go to HR so that they can help us find a solution, because I'm not willing to sit there and be interrupted the entire time or whatever. So that's the consequence. Now you're letting them know. And again, that may have been the second or third time they did it. And you're saying, if this happens again, this is what I'm doing. So a lot of times we'll give the person a heads up, like, hey, I've already asked you, just like my client with her parents, I've already told you, this doesn't work for me. You continue to ignore my feelings. So this is the action. With her parents, she didn't even warn them because she had had 4 different conversations with them about them stopping by and they still were doing it. She really wanted that pow effect of being like, and now your key doesn't work. And that was appropriate for the way that she felt, for how hurt her feelings were. She was also willing to let the chips fall where they may. And this is the whole thing with consequences, is we cannot threaten to do something that we're not willing to do. And it can also be simple. It can be someone who always leaves you sitting where you're always late. You make a simple request. If you're going to be late, let me know. And if they don't do it, they can say, listen, the next time you don't let me know, I'm leaving the restaurant, because me sitting here for 20 minutes is so infuriating and hurts my feelings, and I don't want to do it. And then the next time, if they leave you sitting more than 10 minutes, you leave. At least that's what I did when I was in my 20s. And this is how I established a better relationship, actually, with one of my sisters, who was always late, never letting me know. It was so infuriating, and it was totally handleable, right? Like, it was figure outable, as my pal Marie Forleo would say, where I could just not put myself in that situation. And I also had a friend, and I've talked about this before, who was always super, super late, and I just stopped meeting her in public places. I only was like, hey, why don't we just meet at my apartment? Get there when you get there. And as long as I was home, I always would do it on a Sunday when I knew I was going to be home, because I really loved that friend and I really wanted to be with her. I didn't need it to be like a consequence to her, because she's still late all the time, even to her own events, right? But I really loved her and I got something from the friendship. So I protected myself by changing what I was willing to do. I'm just not willing to meet her in public anymore. So there's lots of different ways of approaching consequences. But I hope that this episode has given you food for thought about how you can be more effective in your boundary setting. Don't forget to go get the guide, terricole.com/guide, where I'm giving you examples and ways that you can come up with your own consequences. Thank you, thank you, thank you for spending time with me today. You know, I appreciate you guys so very much. And as always, take care of you.